They were left to freeze, two newborn sisters abandoned in a basket, hidden under the storm like they were never meant to live. No warmth, no voice, just fragile breaths fading in the snow. And no one knew until he came. A battered German shepherd, scarred but unbroken, carrying more than hope on his teeth. What happened next will break your heart and heal it all at once. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. And if you believe in miracles, if you believe every child deserves love, not darkness, hit that subscribe button, because this story will stay with you forever. The storm had swallowed Millbrook whole. Snow pressed against the old colonial windows of the police station, groaning under the weight of the night. Wind howled like a pack of wolves across Main Street, scattering powder into every crevice of the quiet Vermont town. It was the kind of storm that silenced even the late-night drunks and kept cars frozen in driveways. Inside the Millbrook Police Department, the fluorescent lights hummed softly, casting pale halos on the linoleum floors. Deputy Ethan Cole leaned back in his chair, rubbing the fatigue from his eyes. Ethan was 42, broad-shouldered, with dark blonde hair cropped close to the scalp and silver streaks forming at his temples. His square jaw carried the wear of years in service, his gray-blue eyes the permanent weight of a man who had seen too much violence to believe the world was fair. Yet there was kindness in his manner, an unspoken patience when he dealt with the vulnerable. He had joined law enforcement after his time in the Army, trading sand and heat for ice and silence, hoping small-town life would be calmer. Tonight, he sipped lukewarm coffee and muttered, "Another damn blizzard." Beside the front desk, Vanessa Green stood, shaking melting snow from her coat. She was FBI, 41 years old, a black woman with a slender frame, tightly coiled hair pinned into a neat bun, and thin-framed glasses perched on her nose. Her eyes, sharp, intelligent, and unyielding, studied every detail around her. Vanessa was known for being meticulous, her colleagues often calling her the Ledger because she forgot nothing. Her life had been shaped by years of undercover work and betrayal, which left her cautious, sometimes hard to read. Yet beneath the steel was someone who carried compassion quietly, never flaunted but always present. It was near midnight when the door burst open. The crash echoed through the lobby like a gunshot. Ethan was on his feet instantly, hand near his holster, while Vanessa stiffened. What staggered through the threshold was not a man with a weapon, but a shape that seemed pulled from legend. A dog massive, fur black and tan, matted with blood and ice, pushed into the room. His paws slipped on the linoleum, claws scraping, chest heaving like bellows. The German shepherd collapsed just inside the doorway, and only then did they see what he carried. Clenched in his jaws was the handle of a plastic basket, the kind used for groceries, only modified with leather straps tied to a makeshift harness at his chest. The basket dragged behind him on crude wooden runners, jury-rigged to slide over snow. Inside, bundled in emergency foil blankets and layers of torn fabric, were two newborn girls. Their tiny faces were pale, lips faintly blue, but their chests rose and fell, fragile but alive. A lukewarm water bottle wrapped in cloth sat between them, the only crude attempt at heat. Ethan swore under his breath. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. The shepherd released the basket's handle with a low whine before collapsing on his side. He was large, at least 70 pounds, but thin to the bone. Scars mapped his flank like pale rivers across dark fur, and a deep gash near his shoulder oozed fresh blood. His left ear was notched, torn long ago, healed into a permanent reminder of battles survived. His amber eyes, though dim with exhaustion, locked on Ethan and Vanessa with a silent plea, "Protect them." "Jesus Christ," Ethan muttered, already moving to check the basket. "How the hell?" The dog growled weakly, protective even as his body trembled. Vanessa crouched low, her voice calm and steady. "He's not letting go," she said. "He's guarding them." Even now, the station's night medic rushed forward, scooping the twins into careful arms. Their cries were faint, their skin chilling to the touch. Ethan guided the medic toward the backroom infirmary, shouting for warm fluids, heat lamps, anything that could fight the frost from their blood. The shepherd's gaze never wavered from the basket until the last corner of blanket disappeared into the hall. Only then did he allow his head to fall to the floor. Vanessa knelt by him, brushing snow from his coat. "This dog," she whispered, "he didn't just stumble in. He knew exactly what he was doing." Ethan exhaled hard, wiping sweat despite the cold draft swirling through the open door. "Where the hell did you come from, boy?" It was the Phongvian who answered. Lily Grant, 26, a local reporter, had been stuck in the station waiting out the storm after covering a school board meeting earlier that night. She was petite, with auburn hair that curled at her shoulders, freckles on pale skin, and an almost stubborn energy in her green eyes. She wore a bulky parka far too big for her frame, clutching a battered camera. She had filmed everything. "You're not going to believe this," she said breathlessly, "but I saw him in the parking lot." He wasn't wandering. He was dragging that basket straight here, like he knew Ethan frowned. "What's his name?" Lily shook her head. "I don't know." "He doesn't have a tag." Vanessa studied the shepherd. "That harness," she noted, running her fingers over the cracked leather straps. "It's military surplus. SAR unit issue. He belonged to someone trained." The dog's chest rose and fell raggedly, but when Ethan knelt closer, he caught a faint engraving burned into the leather collar. The letters were scratched, almost worn away by years, but still visible. "Ranger. Ranger," Ethan whispered. The name fit. Vanessa's brows arched. "Like a soldier." Ethan nodded slowly. "Like someone who doesn't quit." The shepherd stirred at the sound, tail thumping weakly once against the cold floor. The name was his. It had followed him through storms and fire, through whatever hell had scarred him to reach this place. Ranger. As the medic's voice echoed from the back room, their breathing steady now, relief swept through the station. Yet Ethan's gut twisted. 2 infants, left in the snowstorm, a half-dead shepherd carrying them miles to safety. There were questions, too many questions, but one truth cut through all of it. Without Ranger, those girls would already be gone. Outside, the blizzard raged on. Inside, 3 strangers stared at one another, an exhausted cop, a meticulous FBI agent, and a scarred shepherd who had already written himself into the legend of Millbrook. The night was only beginning. The infirmary at the back of Millbrook Police Department smelled faintly of antiseptic and heating lamps. The 2 newborns lay in shallow bassinets, their fragile bodies wrapped in layers of foil blankets and warmed with IV fluids. Their tiny fists clenched and unclenched like fragile blossoms trying to hold on to life. The station's night medic, Dr. Harold Emmons, a man in his late 50s with a thin frame and a perpetually stooped posture from years of bending over patients, worked tirelessly to stabilize them. His thinning gray hair clung to his scalp in damp streaks, and his glasses constantly slid down his long nose as he moved from one monitor to another. Emmons was not a man given to dramatics. His personality was pragmatic, efficient, but with a quiet tenderness reserved only for the truly vulnerable. He spoke softly as he checked the twins, muttering reassurance to no one in particular, perhaps to himself. Heart rate steadying, good, body temps climbing, they'll hold. In the lobby, the storm outside beat against the old wooden doors, rattling the glass panes like fists demanding to be let in. Ranger had refused to stay still once the twins were carried away. His ribs showed under his thick coat as he stood, wobbling slightly from blood loss and exhaustion, yet he barked in sharp bursts, tugging at the leather harness that still hung from his chest. His nose pressed insistently toward the door, his claws scratching the tiles in a staccato rhythm of urgency. Ethan Cole crouched down in front of him. The fatigue around Ethan's eyes had deepened since the last hour, but the storm of emotions inside him gave his voice a firm edge. "You're not done, are you?" Ranger whined, pressing his muzzle to the door seam, then looked back at Ethan as though the answer should have been obvious. Ethan glanced at Vanessa Green, who stood with her arms folded, watching with the narrowed focus of someone assembling pieces of a puzzle. Vanessa stepped forward, her eyes catching on the shepherd's coat. She reached gently, brushing along the fur near his flank. When she pulled her hand back, her fingertips were dusted in white powder. She rubbed it between her fingers, lifted it to her nose. "Talc," she murmured. She pressed again into the thicker patches along Ranger's ruff, finding smudges of pale cream hardened into the hairs. "And this diaper cream. He's been in or near a nursery." Recently, Ethan blinked. "So wherever he came from, that's where they had those babies." "Exactly," Vanessa said. "And if he's this desperate to go back—" She trailed off, letting the implication hang. There were more. Lily Grant had been leaning against the wall, camera dangling from its strap around her neck, her face pale with shock, but her green eyes bright with restless curiosity. She pulled out her phone, her hands tapping quickly as she dialed a number. "I know someone at St. Mary's down the street," she said. "A nurse who leaks me school board gossip. If 2 newborns showed up at any local hospital, she'd know." Ethan shot her a look. "Lily, this isn't a news scoop. This isn't gossip either," she cut in, straightening her posture despite the oversized parka swallowing her frame. "If there are more kids out there, someone needs to know. Besides, hospitals keep track of every birth. 2 babies like that don't just vanish." Vanessa raised a hand before Ethan could argue further. "Let her call. If nothing else, it's a lead we can verify." The shepherd barked again, louder this time, the sound echoing across the station. His paws scraped against the tiles, body trembling with urgency. Ethan sighed, pulling a small GPS tracker from the equipment cabinet. He fixed it to the leather harness with a zip tie, tightening until the blinking light pulsed steady. "If we're going after him, I'm not losing him in that storm," he said grimly. Dr. Emmons entered, pulling off his gloves. "The twins are stable," he announced. His voice was calm but carried the weight of relief. "But they're premature. They'll need NICU care soon, a proper hospital. For now, they'll hold." He glanced at Ranger, frowning. "That dog brought them here?" Ethan nodded. "Dragged them in through the storm. Without him, they'd be corpses right now." The doctor studied Ranger for a long moment, his expression softening despite the clinical detachment he usually wore. "Well," he murmured, "then I suppose he's the reason they're breathing." He adjusted his glasses, then added, "But he won't last much longer if you don't treat that wound." Vanessa crouched again beside Ranger, looking into those amber eyes. "Do you want us to follow you?" she asked. The shepherd's tail gave a single weak thump, and he tugged once more at the harness strap. His meaning was clear. Meanwhile, Lily's call went through. Her voice shifted from impatient to alarmed. "No. No record? Not at St. Mary's? Not at any hospital in the county?" She hung up, her face pale. "She says there haven't been any twin births logged this week. Nothing even close. These babies. They're not in the system." Ethan cursed under his breath. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. That meant trafficking. Illegal, invisible, hidden beneath the snow like rot under clean linen. The storm battered the doors again, but Ranger did not flinch. He barked once, then pressed his nose firmly to the crack at the bottom. Ethan grabbed his coat and heavy gloves, slinging a rifle across his back. Vanessa zipped her FBI jacket, clipped her sidearm holster, her posture sharpened with decision. "We don't have time to lose," she said. "The longer we wait, the colder the trail gets." Literally, Ethan knelt, resting a hand on Ranger's neck. The fur was rough, matted with old scars, but beneath it the muscles quivered with restrained energy. "All right, Ranger," he said quietly. "Show us where." The shepherd turned sharply, nose to the door, body taut with purpose. The GPS light blinked steadily on his harness. Behind them the twins slept, their breathing shallow but steady, unaware of the storm that had brought them to this moment. The door opened, the blizzard screaming in like an angry spirit. Snowflakes swirled, biting at exposed skin. Ranger plunged forward, paws striking snow, the harness strap swinging against his chest. Ethan and Vanessa followed into the storm, flashlights cutting narrow tunnels through the darkness. Lily hesitated at the doorway, clutching her parka tighter, but her reporter's instinct flared. She slung her camera strap across her shoulder and stepped out after them, whispering to herself, "This is bigger than any headline." Somewhere in the storm, more lives waited. Ranger would not stop until he found them. The storm had eased by the time Ranger led them out of town, though snow still drifted across the fields in long, whispering waves. The blizzard's rage had settled into a quieter cruelty cold that cut through wool and leather, and silence broken only by the crunch of boots and the steady panting of the German shepherd ahead. Ethan's flashlight beam swept over barren trees and tangled underbrush, while Vanessa kept her eyes on the GPS tracker blinking on Ranger's harness. The trail had become less a path and more an instinct, the dog weaving with certainty through snowbanks until the hulking outline of the old rail yard warehouse emerged from the white fog. The warehouse was a forgotten relic on the edge of Millbrook, a cavernous building of corrugated steel with patches of rust bleeding down its sides. Long ago, trains had pulled up here to offload timber and coal, but now the tracks were broken and swallowed by weeds poking through frozen ground. Windows sat shattered in their frames, black eyes staring out at the storm. The front doors sagged on rusted hinges, creaking faintly as the wind pushed against them. Ethan raised a gloved fist, signaling halt. "This place hasn't seen business in 20 years, he muttered. His breath hung like smoke. "What the hell are we doing here?" Ranger answered by lowering his head, nose to the snow. He padded forward, then stopped abruptly at the wide double doors. With a sharp bark, he pawed at the ground. Ethan swung his flashlight down and froze. There, half buried under fresh snow, was a long scrape mark, narrow and shallow, like something heavy had been dragged inside. Ethan knelt, brushed the snow away with his gloves, revealing the clear pattern of a basket's bottom edge. "Same dimensions," Ethan whispered. "Same as the one he dragged into the station." Vanessa crouched beside him, her sharp eyes catching on flecks of pale powder clinging to the grooves. She pinched it carefully and held it under her nose. "Formula," she said. "Baby formula powder." Her voice dropped lower. "We're in the right place." Lily, puffing clouds of breath through her scarf, raised her camera, snapping photos of the trail. She looked smaller than ever in her oversized parka, but her expression was fierce. "If they're moving babies through here," her words trailed off, as if even voicing it felt profane. They pushed inside. The warehouse smelled of oil and mildew, the air colder inside than out. Their flashlights swept across broken crates and rusting equipment, shadows stretching long on the cracked concrete floor. Ranger padded steadily forward, his nails clicking faintly, until he stopped near the far corner. He lowered his head and barked once, sharp. Vanessa swung her beam down. There, tucked beneath a collapsed pallet, lay a torn cardboard box filled with unused diapers. Beside it, discarded plastic wrappers for newborn blankets, and an empty vial labeled Vitamin K Injection. The print was crisp, recent, not something abandoned decades ago. Vanessa lifted the box, turning it so the faint logo printed on the side caught the light. "Blackwell Foundation," she read. Her lips tightened. Of course. Ethan's brow furrowed. He knew the name. Everyone in Millbrook did. Thomas Blackwell was the town's philanthropist, darling, a broad-shouldered man in his 60s, with a mane of white hair and a smile polished for cameras. He funded the children's wing of the hospital, sponsored scholarships, donated heavily to charities. He was the face of benevolence. And yet rumors had always whispered, shipments that never matched invoices, children's homes overseas that closed suddenly without explanation, nothing proven. Until now. The sound of a throat clearing startled them. All three turned sharply, Ethan's hand on his holster. An old man stood in the doorway they had entered, lantern swinging from his gloved hand. His back was slightly bent, shoulders rounded under a patched wool coat. A knitted cap covered his thin gray hair, and his face was deeply wrinkled, his nose red from cold. Despite his age, his eyes were sharp as flint. "I wouldn't go poking too far without knowing what's been done here," he said, his voice gravelly, each word slow and deliberate. Ethan relaxed slightly, hand easing from his holster. "Who are you?" "Name's Frank Doyle," the man replied. "Used to be the yard watchman back when trains ran through here. Been living out this way since. Folks don't bother much with this place, except at night." He stepped closer, his boots crunching on scattered ice. "I've seen trucks. Big box trucks. They come past midnight, no lights, head right here, stay a spell, then drive off before sunup." Lily stepped forward, notebook already out. "How often?" Frank scratched his chin. "Every couple weeks. More frequent this winter, though. Seen 4 in the last month alone." He narrowed his eyes at the shepherd, who had not taken his gaze off the old man. "That your dog?" Ethan shook his head. "No. He brought us here." Frank nodded slowly as though that explained everything. "Then you best listen to him. Animals know what people don't want to admit." Vanessa held up the Blackwell Foundation box. "Did you see who was driving these trucks?" Frank's lips tightened. "Too dark, too careful. But I caught sight of a symbol on one of the doors. White cross on a green background. Same as that there box you're holding. Didn't sit right with me, not one bit." The wind howled through the broken windows, rattling shards of glass in their frames. Ranger shifted, letting out a low growl. Vanessa lowered the box, her voice cold and precise. "That's enough to start a paper trail. Enough to tie Blackwell to this place." Ethan scanned the room again, light sweeping over the concrete. "Let's mark this. Bag everything. We'll need evidence teams out here by morning." He crouched once more, tracing the grooves of the dragged basket. His jaw tightened. Someone used this place to move infants. God knows how many. Lily's camera clicked again, her breath visible in the frigid air. Her hands shook, but not from cold. She looked at Ethan, her green eyes blazing. You need to bring this out. You can't bury it in reports. People need to know what's happening right here. Ethan didn't respond. His gaze had gone distant, troubled, locked on the long scrape lines leading into the warehouse shadows. He thought of the twins sleeping in the infirmary, of Ranger's battered body still dragging himself forward when all reason said he should have collapsed. Ranger sniffed along the ground, then barked again, once, twice, his body turning toward the back of the warehouse where a set of heavy double doors led out to the rail line. Ethan followed, shining his light on fresh tire tracks pressed deep into the snow. Whoever had been here hadn't left long ago. Frank's voice was quiet, almost lost to the storm outside. You're stirring up something dangerous, son. Men who run trucks like that, they don't forgive. They don't forget. Ethan straightened, snowflakes catching in his short blonde hair, his breath coming out in frosty plumes. Then it's time someone made them remember. The shepherd's growl deepened, echoing through the cavernous hall as if to agree. The warehouse still groaned in the wind as Ethan, Vanessa, Lily, and Ranger stood in its shadowed belly, the air sharp with rust and old oil. They had bagged what evidence they could, boxes of diapers, wrappers, and the empty vitamin K vial. But the rest of the cavernous room felt scrubbed clean. Ethan's instincts screamed that they had arrived too late. Ranger paced near the far wall, nose pressed low, then suddenly barked once, sharp, as his paw scraped against a square outline in the concrete. Ethan crouched, running his gloved hand along the edge. It was faint but unmistakable, the seam of a hidden hatch. With effort, he pried it open, hinges squealing. A blast of warm air wafted up, carrying scents that cut through the warehouse's mildew disinfectant, baby formula, rubber tubing. Ranger growled, his hackles rising as he peered into the black. Vanessa shined her flashlight down. A narrow metal ladder descended into a small chamber below. At the bottom, they found a crude nursery of sorts, a single heating unit rattling, cheap cribs lined with worn blankets, empty bottles scattered on the floor. The walls bore a stenciled symbol white cross on a green square, the same mark Frank Doyle had described. Next to it, a hand-painted number. Lot 47. Vanessa exhaled through clenched teeth. Shipment tracking code. Pine Hollow facility uses the same schema. This isn't just local, it's networked. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. His breath misted as he spoke. Whoever was here cleared out fast. They knew we were coming. The words hung heavy. Vanessa's eyes sharpened behind her glasses. Which means someone fed them our plan. Someone inside the system. They climbed back up, sealing the hatch again, the weight of betrayal heavier than the snow piling against the warehouse doors. Lily's voice broke the silence. She had been fiddling with a small analog camera she'd salvaged from the corner of the warehouse. Its casing was cracked, but she managed to rewind the tape with careful fingers. If this thing works, we might have eyes on whoever came through here. The camera hummed to life, its tiny screen flickering with static before forming shaky black and white images. Most of the reel was useless rats scurrying, shadows shifting, but then one frame froze them all in place. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a long wool coat, white hair glinting under a security light. He carried himself with the ease of a man accustomed to admiration. The camera caught his profile clearly enough. Thomas Blackwell. Lily gasped softly, hand clamped over her mouth. That's him. The philanthropist. I interviewed him last spring for a gala fundraiser. He spoke about protecting the innocent. Her voice trembled. He was standing right here. Vanessa closed her eyes for a moment, her jaw tight. Blackwell Foundation fronts the trafficking. This confirms it. She snapped the camera shut and slid it into an evidence bag, but we still need a trail that holds up in court. And if they cleared this place, they'll be scrubbing Pine Hollow next. As they debated their next move, headlights flared outside the warehouse. Ethan drew his sidearm instantly, motioning Lily behind a stack of crates. Ranger growled low, his body taut like a coiled spring. The door creaked open and a man stumbled in, bundled against the cold in a deputy's jacket. His face was ruddy from the wind, but his eyes darted nervously. Ethan recognized him at once. Deputy Mark Ellison, late 30s, average build, sandy hair that stuck out beneath his cap. Mark had always been the easygoing type, known around the station for his jokes and his habit of chewing sunflower seeds during long shifts. Tonight, though, his humor was gone. His hands shook as he pulled his cap off, his expression guilty. "What the hell are you doing here, Mark?" Ethan demanded. Mark hesitated, glancing toward Ranger's glowing eyes in the dark. I was assigned to check the perimeter," he stammered, though no such order had been given. His boots scuffed nervously at the floor. Vanessa stepped forward, her tone ice. "Perimeter checks weren't dispatched. And funny thing, we were ambushed by emptiness tonight. Trucks cleared out hours before we arrived. Almost like they had advance notice." Mark's face drained of color. "That's crazy. I didn't..." Ethan cut him off sharply. "Save it. You've been on dispatch rotation the last 2 weeks, haven't you? You had access to route schedules." Ranger lunged forward suddenly, snapping his jaws inches from Mark's boot. The deputy jumped back, sweat breaking on his forehead. Ethan caught the flicker in his eyes, fear not of the dog, but of being exposed. Vanessa narrowed her gaze. "You tipped them off." Mark's lips parted, but no denial came. He swallowed hard, backing toward the door. "You don't understand. They have people everywhere. If I didn't tell them, my wife, my kids..." His voice cracked. "They said they'd disappear too." For a moment, the only sound was the wind howling through the broken windows. Ethan lowered his weapon but kept his stance rigid. "You should have come to us." Mark's eyes were wet, his voice breaking. "You don't know what they're capable of. Blackwell isn't just money. He's got men who will bury entire families without leaving a footprint." Vanessa exchanged a look with Ethan. The betrayal cut deep, but so did the fear in Mark's voice. He wasn't innocent, but neither was he fully complicit. He was a man crushed under pressure, choosing survival the only way he thought possible. Before they could press further, Ranger barked sharply again, spinning toward the back doors. He scratched at the snow-crusted floor, growling. Vanessa trained her light where he pointed, revealing fresh boot prints leading away from the warehouse prints that hadn't been there minutes ago. Someone else was out in the storm, close enough to hear everything. Ethan snapped orders quickly. "We've got company. Vanessa, bag that tape. Lily, stay behind me, Mark." He hesitated, then barked. "You're not leaving my sight." They filed out into the snow again, the storm whipping harder, Ranger straining at his lead. Behind them, the warehouse loomed like a grave marker, holding secrets they had only begun to unearth. Ahead, the trail stretched toward Pine Hollow, and every step carried the weight of betrayal. At dawn, the storm had eased into a dull gray drizzle of snow, the streets of Millbrook buried beneath new drifts. Inside the police infirmary, the glow of heat lamps reflected off foil blankets that cocooned the 2 newborn girls. Their color had returned faintly, cheeks no longer icy blue but flushed pink in patches, tiny lungs fighting bravely against the cold that had nearly stolen them. A low beeping from monitors tracked fragile heartbeats, steady now, no longer erratic. The night medic, Dr. Harold Emmons, had stayed awake through the storm, dark circles etched beneath his tired eyes, his spectacles fogged from constant adjustments. He leaned over the bassinets, his voice a whisper. "They're fighters. That much is clear." At the foot of the bassinets lay Ranger, the German shepherd's body curled protectively, his amber eyes never straying far from the twins. Every time the infirmary door creaked open, his left ear twitched sharply, scars on his flank rising as though prepared to defend. Though exhaustion dragged at his ribs, he refused to rest fully, his gaze flicking between the babies and the adults as if measuring trust. Blood had been washed from his coat, a bandage now wrapped across his shoulder wound, but even injury had not dulled the vigilance bred into him. Ethan Cole entered the infirmary, his winter uniform still stiff with snow. He paused at the doorway, watching the tableau 2 infants breathing softly, the scarred shepherd standing guard like a sentinel, and Dr. Emmons bent with paternal patience. For a moment, Ethan allowed himself to feel the quiet pride of survival, but it passed quickly. Duty pressed harder than relief. Vanessa Green arrived behind him, her dark coat dusted with frost, phone pressed to her ear. She listened, her face hardening by degrees. "Repeat that," she said sharply. She clicked off the call, her tone flat. "The dispatch logs from last night were tampered with. The route schedule for the warehouse was accessed remotely 20 minutes before we moved. Access came from the county's dispatch server." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Who had the credentials?" "Cross-check shows one name," Vanessa said. "Dispatcher Harold Pike. Logged in off shift. Tried to wipe the record, but it caught the anomaly. Ethan cursed under his breath. Pike had been with the department for over a decade, a heavy-set man in his 50s with thinning hair and a belly earned from long hours behind the radio desk. He was known for his jovial small talk and his habit of baking pies for the annual Christmas party. A man who seemed harmless until now. Ethan shook his head bitterly. He was in my house last Thanksgiving, passing out bourbon like it was candy. And all this time, Vanessa's gaze softened just slightly. Fear twists people. Or greed. Maybe both, but we can prove it now. Prove. While Ethan processed, Lily Grant typed furiously on her laptop in the corner. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her cheeks flushed from lack of sleep, but her green eyes alight with purpose. She spoke without looking up. I've finished drafting my first piece. No names, no photos, no identifying details about the twins, just the facts. A German shepherd brought 2 newborns out of a storm. Evidence links a warehouse to the Blackwell Foundation, and the FBI is investigating. She tapped the keyboard with finality. The world deserves to know something is rotting under all of Blackwell's charity galas. Ethan frowned. Lily, this could compromise. Vanessa cut him off. No, it could protect. Public exposure makes it harder for Blackwell to sweep this under the rug. As long as she's careful, it works in our favor. Within hours, the article went live on the regional news site Lily freelanced for. The headline was simple yet sharp. Storm strangers and a shepherd. Deku. The night Millbrook's quiet cracked open. Comments surged, shares multiplied, and by midday, whispers of Blackwell's name had crawled onto national feeds. By afternoon, Blackwell himself appeared on live television. He stood behind a polished podium at the Blackwell Foundation headquarters, a brick building adorned with ivy. His silver hair gleamed under studio lights, his tailored navy suit immaculate. Cameras captured every gesture as he smiled the smile Millbrook had known for years. These are dangerous rumors, he said smoothly, his baritone calm. The Blackwell Foundation has spent decades serving children across the globe. I will not stand by while unfounded accusations attempt to tarnish that work. His blue eyes flickered just once, betraying a shadow of irritation before his grin returned. Rest assured, we will cooperate fully with authorities to dispel this nonsense. In the infirmary, Ethan turned off the television with a grimace. He's rattled. That's why he came out so fast. He's trying to control the fire. Vanessa adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable. And by coming out this quickly, he confirms he feels threatened. Lily's article hit harder than we thought. She turned her eyes toward the twins. Now we have to keep them alive long enough for their truth to matter. Dr. Emmons, checking the baby's monitors, spoke softly. They're stabilizing, but they're premature. If you want a future for them, they'll need a hospital NICU soon. At that moment, Ethan's phone buzzed with a secure line call. He listened, color draining from his face. DNA rush test came back. The twins are related. Their mother was Eleanor Marsh. The name landed heavily. Eleanor Marsh, thin, dark-haired, mid-30s, had gone missing 8 months earlier after filing a formal complaint against the Blackwell Foundation. She had claimed funds were being siphoned, supplies disappearing, and whispered that children weren't being placed in safe homes, but in something darker. Her friends had described her as fierce and uncompromising, a woman who had grown up in foster care and dedicated her life to protecting kids from the same pain. She vanished one night without a trace. Many believed she'd simply fled the threats she'd received. Now, her DNA lived on in the tiny twins in the bassinets. Vanessa's lips tightened. That's the umbilical truth. She tried to expose them, and they silenced her, but not completely. These children are the proof she left behind. Ranger stirred at the sound of raised voices, pushing himself up despite the stiffness in his injured shoulder. He stepped closer to the bassinets, lowering his head until his muzzle brushed the foil blanket. The twins squirmed faintly, their fingers brushing his fur as though recognizing the guardian who had dragged them out of the storm. His tail gave one faint thump against the floor. Ethan knelt, scratching lightly behind the shepherd's ear. You knew, didn't you? You carried them here because someone had to finish what Eleanor started. Ranger's eyes closed for a moment, as though agreeing in silence. The room quieted again, heavy with both grief and purpose. Outside, the snow began to fall again, lighter now, dusting the town in deceptive peace. But inside Millbrook PD, the circle of truth was tightening, its roots reaching back to Blackwell. The Pine Hollow Valley lay blanketed under white, its skeletal pines creaking under the weight of snow. Wind funneled down the gorge, carrying the smell of diesel and smoke, foreign scents in a place meant to be untouched wilderness. Ranger trotted at the front of the group, his body moving with an urgency that cut through exhaustion. His paws pressed into ice, his amber eyes sharp even as his wounded shoulder stiffened. Ethan trudged behind him, rifle slung, his breath fogging in bursts. Vanessa walked close, her dark eyes scanning the ridgelines, her gloved hand steady on her sidearm. Lily followed, smaller than the others in her heavy parka, camera clutched tight, each step betraying her resolve more than her strength. Deputy Mark Ellison trailed nervously, his face pale, sweat freezing against his brow despite the cold. It was Ranger who stopped first, nose pressed to the snow near a ridge overlooking the hollow. He barked once, ears flicking forward. Below them lay a scatter of cargo containers arranged in a rough semicircle, their sides painted with the green cross and square insignia of the Blackwell Foundation. From above, they looked like innocuous relief units, but smoke coiled from chimneys rigged to their tops, and faint light glowed through slit windows cut into the steel. Ethan's jaw clenched. There it is. A nursery in the middle of nowhere. Vanessa adjusted her binoculars, her breath hissing. Modified shipping containers, portable incubators, heating units. This matches the supply chain Eleanor Marsh flagged in her complaint. She lowered the glasses. We don't have a warrant for this. If we go in, it's off the books. Ethan's voice was cold. If we wait, those kids don't wake up tomorrow. As if in response, movement flickered below. A man in a heavy parka stepped from one container, tall and broad, carrying a rifle slung across his chest. His face was weathered, late 40s, with a crooked nose that had been broken more than once. He barked an order in a voice rough with cigarettes. More men emerged, each armed, each watchful. These weren't volunteers, they were guards. One of them carried a crate to a waiting snowcat vehicle, its engine idling, treads chewing into ice. Ethan's stomach dropped. They're moving them. Ranger growled low, his body trembling with pent energy. Ethan placed a hand on his harness, whispering, "Not yet." But the moment didn't last. A gust of wind shifted their scent downslope, and one guard's head snapped upward. He shouted, raising his weapon. Muzzle flashes bloomed against the snow, the crack of gunfire breaking Pine Hollow's silence. Ethan and Vanessa dove for cover, dragging Lily down with them. Ranger bolted forward, a blur of black and tan cutting across the ridge. The fight was sudden and brutal. Ethan fired back, his military training snapping into instinct. Bullets pinged off frozen rock, the acrid smell of cordite mixing with pine sap and diesel. Vanessa, calm even under fire, picked her shots, dropping 2 guards with clinical precision. Lily huddled behind a snowbank, her camera still raised, lens shaking but capturing every frame. Ranger tore down the slope, his breath a cloud of fury. A container door burst open, and through it Ethan glimpsed rows of bassinets welded to steel racks, small shapes bundled within. A guard tried to drag one bassinet out, its wheels locking in the ice. The man cursed, yanking at it until Ranger hit him like a missile. The shepherd's teeth clamped onto the man's wrist, sending the rifle skittering. The man screamed, blood splattering across the snow, and fled into the trees, arm hanging limp. Then came the moment that would carve itself into memory. Another guard, panicked, shoved a bassinet onto a crude sled to haul it toward the snowcat. The sled slipped, tilting, sending the tiny cargo skidding uncontrollably down an icy incline toward a ravine. Ethan shouted, breaking cover, but he was too far. Ranger sprinted after it, claws scrabbling on ice. His body slammed into the sled just before the edge, jaws gripping the strap. The momentum dragged him forward, paws inches from the drop, but with a guttural growl he heaved backward, muscles screaming. The sled stopped, rocking dangerously. Inside, a newborn wailed, tiny fists thrashing. Ethan's chest burned as he rushed to help, grabbing the sled and dragging it to safety. He dropped to one knee, staring at the fragile child wrapped in a thin blanket, alive only because Ranger refused to let go. "You did it," he whispered hoarsely, his hand shaking as it brushed the shepherd's scarred head. Ranger only panted, his breath steaming, his eyes never leaving the infant. Chaos still roared around them. Guards retreated toward the snowcat, one tossing a laptop bag into the cab. Vanessa moved like lightning, sprinting low, gunfire snapping past her ears. She dove, seizing the bag as the snowcat roared away, then rolled behind cover. Breathless, she yanked it open, revealing a battered laptop. The screen flickered to life, password prompt glowing. Ethan crouched beside her, his voice urgent. "What's on it?" Vanessa's fingers flew. Schedules. Manifests. She cracked into cached files, her face illuminated by the sickly glow. Here, labeled routes for the Foundation's aid convoys, Blackwell's trucks. Every date matches warehouse activity, including last night's. Her eyes narrowed. This is the spine. The whole operation mapped out. Meanwhile, Lily edged from cover, ignoring Ethan's sharp warning. She zoomed her camera on the containers, focusing on stenciled codes printed along their sides. She whispered to herself, "Lot 47, Lot 49. Everyone's got a different shipment number." She captured each marking in crisp frames, careful to get the green and white logo in every shot. A bullet pinged off ice inches from her boot. She gasped, but steadied her camera. Her hands trembled, but she refused to lower it. Later, those shots would become her proof, the kind of evidence even Blackwell's lawyers couldn't dismiss. The firefight dwindled as the guards retreated, their snowcat grinding up the ridge and disappearing into the forest. Ethan scanned the field, chest heaving, ears ringing from the gunfire. "Clear!" he shouted hoarsely. They regrouped by the containers. Inside, the air reeked of formula and bleach. Portable incubators hummed softly, half of them empty, the other half holding infants swaddled in mismatched blankets. Drip lines dangled from metal hooks, bottles of milk stacked in crates beside them. Ranger padded through, nose brushing the bassinets gently, a low whine rumbling in his throat. His bandaged shoulder bled anew, red streaking against white fur, but he moved as if pain had no hold on him. Vanessa knelt by the laptop, tucking it into her pack. Her voice was clipped, controlled, but Ethan caught the tremor beneath. "This proves it. Blackwell's charity isn't just a front, it's the transport system itself. Every convoy, every relief truck, it's all here." Lily lowered her camera at last, eyes shimmering with tears. "People have to see this. They won't be able to pretend anymore." Mark Ellison leaned against the container door, face pale, his hands shaking. He muttered, "I told you they had reach." This is bigger than I ever imagined." Ethan looked at him coldly. "And you helped keep it alive." Mark had no answer, only shame that deepened the lines in his face. Ranger lay down heavily near the rescued bassinet, his chest rising and falling in ragged rhythm. The infant inside stirred, a faint cry breaking the silence, and Ranger lifted his head again, ears pricking. No matter the blood on his fur, no matter the storm outside, he remained on watch. The Pine Hollow camp still smoked in the wind, its secrets bared. But beyond its ruined walls, the war against Blackwell had only just begun. The safe house stood on the edge of Millbrook, a two-story clapboard home once used by visiting deputies, its windows frosted with ice, the driveway buried beneath plowed snow. Inside, the rooms had been stripped down to essentials, a couple of cots, an old wood stove crackling weakly, and the bassinets where the twins lay sleeping under Ranger's vigilant eyes. The air smelled of antiseptic and firewood, but beneath it lingered a tension sharp enough to taste. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his rifle cleaned and loaded, his broad frame hunched forward, gray-blue eyes fixed on the doorway as if expecting it to splinter any second. The storm outside had calmed, but he knew storms could shift quickly, especially when men like Thomas Blackwell decided they were losing control. Vanessa paced near the window, her dark coat still on, sidearm holstered but ready. Every few minutes she glanced at her phone, waiting for word from federal backup. Her sharp gaze softened only when it landed on the infants, their breaths shallow but steady. "We can't hold here forever," she murmured. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop balanced on her knees, uploading the last of her container footage to a secure cloud. Her auburn hair fell loose, face pale with fatigue but lit by determination. "Once this goes live, Blackwell's empire will crack," she whispered, more to herself than the others. Ranger shifted suddenly, ears pricking, body stiffening. He gave a low growl, his scarred muzzle pointed at the door. Ethan froze. A heartbeat later, glass shattered, the back window burst inward, and the night erupted. Thomas Blackwell himself stepped through the breach. The man looked larger in person than on television, broad shoulders filling his tailored winter coat, his silver hair combed back with meticulous pride. His blue eyes were cold now, stripped of the polish he wore for cameras. Behind him, Harold Pike stumbled in, his dispatch uniform wrinkled, face drenched in sweat. His trembling hands clutched a hypodermic needle, its liquid glinting under the dim light. "Where is it?" Blackwell's voice thundered, smoothness gone, replaced by the growl of a cornered predator. "The original file. The rest is worthless without it." Ethan rose, gun leveled. "You're not leaving with anything," Blackwell sneered, motioning Pike forward. The dispatcher's round face was ghostly pale, his thinning hair plastered to his forehead. Once jovial, Pike now looked broken, eyes flicking with guilt. But desperation overrode shame. He lifted the syringe, stepping toward Ethan. The room narrowed to a single instant. Pike lunged, arm jerking forward. Ethan shifted to block too late. But Ranger exploded from the floor, his body a streak of black and tan. The shepherd crashed into Pike, teeth clamping his wrist just as the needle plunged. The syringe snapped, spilling its contents harmlessly across the floor. Pike screamed, collapsing under Ranger's weight. Ethan moved fast, wrenching Pike's arm behind his back, slamming him against the counter. The dispatcher's breath came in ragged sobs. "They made me. He made me. My family." But Ethan's grip didn't ease. Meanwhile, Blackwell drew a sleek pistol from inside his coat, raising it toward the bassinets. Vanessa fired first, her shot ringing sharp in the confined space. The bullet struck his weapon, sending it clattering across the floor. Blackwell roared, grabbing a knife from the counter in one swift motion. Lily's scream tore through the chaos as Blackwell seized her, dragging her against his chest. The blade pressed against her throat. Her camera clattered to the ground, its screen cracked. "Step aside," he hissed, spittle flecking his lips. "Or she bleeds." Ethan froze, gun trained but useless with Lily's head blocking his aim. His chest heaved, muscles coiled. Vanessa's hands tightened on her weapon, her jaw hard. For a moment, the room was nothing but shallow breaths, crying infants, and Blackwell's triumphant snarl. Then Ethan moved. He stepped deliberately forward, lowering his rifle. His voice was steady, but carried steel. "Take me instead." He spread his arms, exposing his chest. "You want a shield, you want leverage, use me." But let her go. Blackwell's eyes flickered. For the first time, uncertainty cracked his mask. That hesitation was all Ranger needed. The shepherd lunged from the side, jaws clamping onto Blackwell's arm with bone-crushing force. Lily dropped to the floor as the knife sliced harmlessly into air. Blackwell bellowed in pain, thrashing, his free hand groping for the blade again. It was then that Ranger took the cut meant for the babies. The knife slashed down, scoring across his flank, blood splattering against the bassinets where the twins cried. But he did not let go. He twisted, dragging Blackwell down. Ethan dove, pinning the man's shoulders, fists pounding until the knife skittered across the linoleum. Vanessa kicked it out of reach, her gun aimed steady. "It's over, Blackwell." In the struggle, a small object clattered onto the floor from the overturned basket beside the bassinets. Lily scrambled, eyes wide. It was a tiny USB drive, taped beneath the rattan frame, cleverly hidden. She snatched it up, breath catching. This is it. The real files. Eleanor Marsh hid them. Vanessa took it with gloved hands, her chest rising sharply. Salaries, accounts, donor lists. This will burn his empire to the ground. Sirens wailed outside, blue lights flashing through the snow. The FBI backup had arrived, their boots pounding on the porch, shouts echoing as they stormed the house. Blackwell, bleeding and bound, slumped against the wall, fury smoldering in his eyes. Pike lay sobbing where Ethan had cuffed him, muttering apologies to no one who would listen. In the corner, Ranger collapsed against the bassinets, blood soaking through the fresh bandages on his flank. The twins reached out, their tiny fists brushing his ears, their cries softened, stilled, as though comforted by his presence. Ethan knelt beside the dog, hands trembling as he pressed cloth against the wound. His voice broke, hoarse with gratitude. "You saved them again, buddy. You saved all of us." His eyes burned as he whispered it, over and over. Ranger's amber eyes fluttered, his tail thumped once, weak but resolute. Even bleeding, even scarred, he stayed at his post beside the children until the medics rushed in. For a moment, in the chaos of sirens and shouting, there was a fragile peace, the kind that comes when truth claws its way through darkness, carried by teeth and blood. The sun crept slowly over Millbrook, painting the snowbound town in hues of pale gold. It was a quiet dawn, the kind that made the world look untouched, as though the horrors of the night before were only bad dreams. But the silence carried truth. Sirens had screamed through the valley until first light, and the echo of boots on frozen ground lingered in memory. Across the state, the federal raid struck hard and fast. Convoys of black SUVs rolled into warehouses, clinics, and container yards linked to the Blackwell Foundation. Helicopters circled overhead, snow whipping in their rotors as agents stormed buildings. In the Pine Hollow camp alone, 23 children were pulled from incubators and cots, their small bodies swaddled in blankets and carried into the light. Across the network, dozens more were rescued, fragile voices crying, their lives pulled back from the machinery of trafficking. At the center of the chaos, Harold Pike broke. Sitting under the harsh lights of an interrogation room, the dispatcher looked smaller than anyone had ever seen him, his once round face gaunt, his hands trembling. He confessed in a flood of words, detailing every call, every message, every time he tipped off the network to raids. His fear for his family had chained him, but the guilt of seeing infants in snow-stained rattan baskets shattered the last of his silence. "I should have stopped it," he wept, "but I didn't know how." They told me Blackwell owned everything. Thomas Blackwell, in stark contrast, arrived in federal custody in handcuffs. Even in defeat, he carried himself with pride, his silver hair neatly combed, his navy suit pressed. But the cameras captured the fury in his eyes, not the polish. He spat denials at every question, calling it political theater, but the weight of the USB drive, the logs from Pike, and Lily's video footage left no air in his defenses. Prosecutors prepared charges of human trafficking, conspiracy, financial fraud, and obstruction. For the first time, the empire he built to look like salvation was exposed for what it truly was: rot, dressed as virtue. While the federal machine turned, Millbrook turned its eyes to its smallest survivors. The twins were placed under state protection, their bassinets moved into the pediatric ward of St. Mary's Hospital. Their frail bodies were cared for around the clock by nurses, and the sound of their breathing was a constant comfort to those who had nearly lost them. Legal proceedings began immediately: background checks, guardianship petitions, and careful vetting of families who could provide them a future. But until that process was complete, Ethan Cole was named temporary guardian. The burden sat heavy on Ethan's broad shoulders, though he bore it with the quiet strength of a soldier turned protector. He visited the girls every morning before his shifts, his rough hand brushing their cheeks with unexpected gentleness. His presence brought them calm, the heartbeats on their monitors evening out whenever he leaned close. He whispered promises they couldn't yet understand, that they would never be left in the cold again. Meanwhile, Ranger lay in recovery at the Richmond Veterinary Trauma Center. Surgeons had stitched his torn flank, layers of muscle knit back together with thread and steel will. He endured blood transfusions, IV fluids, and days under sedation. The staff led by Dr. Margaret Flynn, a middle-aged veterinarian with kind brown eyes and a soft voice, marveled at his resilience. "Any other dog would have gone into shock," she said, stroking his scarred muzzle, "but he stayed awake until those children were safe. That's not instinct. That's choice." Ranger's recovery was slow, his body stiff and scarred, but his spirit never dimmed. When Ethan visited, the shepherd's tail thumped weakly, amber eyes flicking toward the door as though asking to be back on duty. Ethan chuckled hoarsely, kneeling beside him. "You've done enough, buddy. More than enough." Back in Millbrook, the town square filled weeks later under the pale light of late winter. Flags fluttered, and a crowd gathered for a ceremony that felt both official and intimate. At the center, a podium stood draped in navy cloth. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in a pressed uniform, unused to speeches, while Vanessa stood at his side, posture calm, expression softened for once. Lily Grant filmed the event, her auburn hair whipping in the wind, eyes bright with the conviction of a story fulfilled. Her article, titled "The Night of Snow in the Basket," had spread far beyond Vermont. Donations poured into child protection agencies, and Lily had launched a fund for a new children's center in Eleanor Marsh's name. She had grown into the role of witness and advocate, her once local reporting now a national beacon. Then came the moment everyone waited for. Ranger stepped onto the square, a broad leather harness strapped across his chest. The words embroidered in bold white letters caught the winter light. "Retired, still a hero." His gait was slower now, stiff from scars. but the dignity in his step silenced the crowd. At his side walked a nurse pushing a double stroller. Inside, the twins stirred, tiny fists grasping at the cold air. As the applause thundered, Ethan bent, running his hand across the shepherd's flank where fresh scars stretched. His throat tightened as he remembered the USB drive, taped beneath the rattan basket, Eleanor Marsh's last secret gift. Later that night he had read her letter aloud, his voice breaking over the words, "If anyone finds my children, place them in one basket so they will never be parted. Promise me that, and they will survive together." He pressed his palm gently against Ranger's bandaged side, whispering, "You kept her promise, buddy. You carried them through the storm, and you carried me too." The shepherd leaned into his touch, amber eyes half closed, his tail brushing the cold stone. The twins stirred again, their small fingers brushing the leather harness, and for a moment the world felt whole. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or lightning. Sometimes they come on tired paws, in the scar of a soldier dog who refused to give up, or in the fragile breath of two children who were never meant to survive the storm. This story reminds us that God still works through the humble, the scarred, and the broken to bring light where there is only darkness. In our daily lives, we may not face blizzards or trafficking rings, but we do face moments where courage, compassion, and faith are tested. The lesson is simple yet eternal. When we protect the most vulnerable, we walk in step with God Himself. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from, and if you believe in second chances and in miracles, type Amen below. Do not forget to subscribe because every story is a reminder that faith can move mountains and love can heal wounds. May God bless you and your family for standing with the innocent. May He guide your steps as He guided Rangers through the storm.